Imagine being able to instantly heal from any wound, or being immune to all diseases, or turning anything you touch into pure gold, or having superhuman strength. These sound like things one would ask as wishes, and often appear in superhero movies as amazing perks anyone would want to have. However, you will shortly see why these 4 superpowers would actually ruin your life or end it altogether. Welcome to part 3 of my most successful series so far, Superpowers that actually suck. Number 1. Super Strength. Let's start off strong with an absolute classic of childhood dreams, super strength. Like, how cool would it be to be able to lift a car or, I don't know, throw a football into orbit? In any case, you could make sure you never lost in a fight ever again. But let's see if this superpower can hold up to my scrutiny. First of all, we need to understand how the strength of a human could be increased. There are 2 main options: to increase raw muscle mass or to change muscle composition. Let's begin with the first option. To avoid other problems, the first thing I thought of was to increase muscle density instead of size. However, even if you absolutely maximized it, it wouldn't be too far off what we have now, and would certainly not look like a superpower. So we'll have to increase the actual size of our muscles. Let's say we want to be 10 times as strong. Luckily, the relationship between muscle cross-sectional area and strength is pretty much linear, around 40 newtons per square centimeter. I'll take the biceps as a reference for calculations. Their average maximum force is estimated at 1,600 newtons, so we can calculate their CSA to be 40 square centimeters. If we multiply that by 10 and assume the biceps to be a sphere, we'll end up with a volume of 6,000 cubic centimeters, or about a freaking basketball. Now, this would be a 32-fold increase in volume, so if we apply the same scale factor to the rest of the body's muscles, and keeping in mind they make up 40% of the body's mass, so about 30 kilograms for an average adult, we get our superhuman will weigh pretty much exactly 1 metric ton. And, well, let's not even get into what that would look like. So, assuming you don't want to turn into a giant ball of flesh, we'll have to go with our second option from before, muscle composition. With this I mean the ratio between slow twitch fibers, the ones that provide resistance, and fast twitch fibers, the ones that give you raw strength. This is actually the key to how gorillas can be so insanely strong. They have a lot of fast twitch fibers, specifically 67% against humans 50%, so they can exert a load of force, even though they won't be able to maintain it for long. But it's still useful if you want to give someone a super punch. If you had 90% fast twitch fibers and 10% slow twitch fibers, because you need to keep at least some of them, your total strength multiplier would be less than 2. And your durability would be absolutely hopeless. Yeah, not great. But there's one third option which we haven't explored yet, a supersized body. After all, if you distribute our 32-fold increase in mass from before into a giant body, it wouldn't look like a weird amalgam anymore. Well, I won't get into the huge array of complications with a body that's too big, as that's a rabbit hole that definitely deserves its own video, but I'll focus on one specifically related to muscle mass: metabolism. You see, there's something called basal metabolic rate, which is the energy your body spends by just staying alive, and it depends heavily on muscle mass. A study in Nature estimates the calories spent per kilogram of muscle are 13 kilocalories per day. If we multiply that by 1,000 and add in the now tiny contribution of the organs, we get a basal metabolic rate of about 14,500 calories. So somehow you'd need to be eating about 7 times what you're probably eating right now. I don't think your stomach, whose size would not increase as much as your muscles, or your credit card would be able to handle that. And that's not even mentioning that even if your feet had, say, triple the surface area, they'd exert a pressure of about 16 million pascals on the floor, which is far over the pressure bearing capacity of normal ground. You would literally sink into the floor. And the fact that as strength increases with area to the power of 2, while weight increases with volume to the power of 3, you would ironically not be able to support your own weight. And you'd also probably die of overheating because temperature is shed with surface area but produced by volume. And I could keep going. Number 2. Midas touch. Legend tells of a king named Midas who had the power to turn anything he touched into pure gold. In the case of poor King Midas, this came as more of a curse for his greed, as any food or drink he held turned solid, and when he tried to hug his daughter, she met the same fate. However, what if you could willingly select what gets turned into gold and when? You could make so much money, approximately $0 accounting for inflation. Jokes aside, let's see what this quirky ability could bring about. So let's say every time you use your superpower, all the atoms in the object get turned into gold atoms. The more nerdy of you might be able to tell this is not gonna go well. But let's roll with it. Say you want to turn a rock into gold. Here's what will happen as soon as you touch it. First of all, gold atoms have an atomic mass of 197, while that of silicon, the main component in rocks, is only 28, more than 7 times less. But this extra mass has to come from somewhere, because remember that energy cannot be created and mass is energy. The easiest way would be to take it from the rock's thermal energy, as, trust me, you don't want to expend it yourself. But how much energy will we need? Well, if the rock weighed, say, 200 grams, that means the piece of gold will be 1.4 kilograms, so a 1.2 kilogram increase. If we plug this into Einstein's mass energy equivalence formula, we get that the total energy added will be around 108 quadrillion joules. And it turns out, if we take silica's heat capacity, our rock would only give us 60,000 joules of energy before reaching absolute zero temperature. Like, to put this energy requirement into perspective, that's 1.5 times the energy produced by the entire world in an hour, just for a teensy rock. And the opposite applies if you happen to touch an element heavier than gold, say lead. It's actually not that much heavier, but the energy will still add up. If you touch a 200-gram piece of gold, its mass will decrease by 7 grams, which will release the energy in 3 Tsar bombas, the most powerful nuclear weapon ever detonated. Now, relativity prohibits instant density changes, so we'll just pretend the object condenses into pure energy and gets transformed progressively, like we've done a couple of times in this series. If this superpower was even remotely energetically plausible, you'd have another problem. Taking our rock example from before, the atoms in silicon dioxide are arranged into a structure that looks like this, and joined together by covalent bonds. However, gold's structure looks like this, and the atoms are more separated and joined by metallic bonds instead. If we replace all the atoms with gold atoms, they would be in a position which, first, would not allow them to correctly form metallic bonds, and second, would cause electrons to strongly repel each other as the atoms are not closer together. In other words, your rock would instantly disintegrate in a deadly explosion of gold. But what if, instead of carelessly replacing all the atoms with gold atoms, you turn the object's inner structure into a valid one with a higher or lower density to maintain its original energy? That should avoid the energy cost and the explosion, right? Well, yes, but then you'd end up with a kind of porous structure which would be more empty space than actual gold, out of which you probably shouldn't make an armor to rely on. Kinda useless, but I guess it might be this video's least horrible superpower. Number 3. SelfHealing. Being a superhero is a job with a very high mortality rate, and this is often due to the magnitude of the fights they keep getting into. Saying this, it's easy to see how instant self-healing would be really convenient. And even if you're not fighting crime, fixing that broken bone in seconds rather than months sure sounds like an appealing perk. But what if I told you it's actually a really bad idea? Now, to understand why, we first need to know why we don't do this in the first place. You see, to heal a wound or a bone or whatever, we need cells to multiply to make up for the lost ones. And the way cells do this is by doubling their mass and DNA and dividing, in a process called mitosis. However, cells can only multiply so fast for a number of reasons. They're actually biologically limited to a total of 60 duplications, and this is called the Hayflick limit. If a cell population reaches this limit, they stop dividing and start dying. The reason for this is that telomeres, a kind of repeating buffer strands at the ends of chromosomes, get shorter with each division. An enzyme called telomerase is able to extend these telomeres, but if a cell is multiplying too quickly, the telomere will reach a critical shortness and the cell will enter senescence, which is a fancy way of saying it stops dividing. I won't go into the exact chemical reactions that cause this to happen, as that might be a bit too much, but just know that this limit is hard-coded into cells, which means that to achieve this superpower, you would need a completely different biochemistry. Well, but that's fine, just get bitten by the right radioactive starfish or whatever. No, the real problems lie in the reason we have this limit in the first place. You see, mitosis takes a lot of nutrients. After all, we need to create entire new cells. In fact, if you lack some vitamins, you'll notice wound healing takes a lot longer. However, if we remove the Hayflick limit, what's the maximum speed at which cells could divide given the available nutrients? Well, it's hard to give an estimate, but a good starting point might be looking at cancer cells. After all, a cancer is an uncontrolled cell growth. They are, in essence, cells which have lost these mitosis regulation systems, both for speed and for number of duplications, and are growing out of control. The fastest tumor cells I could find are those of glioblastomas, a type of brain cancer. A population of these cells can duplicate in size every 50 days. However, that's not really orders of magnitude over the normal growth rate of wound cells, which is what we'd need to really call this a superpower. Which means that you would either need a kind of super, and I really mean super, blood circulation system and a complete redesign of the entire healing process, or be limited to a mere recovery time boost, rather than Wolverine-style regeneration. But let's go with the first one, because it's more fun. Well, turns out, it'll bring you another problem. DNA errors. Because every time a cell duplicates, as I said, it needs to duplicate its DNA. And DNA is a really complex molecule. So even though the process is generally quite reliable, every once in a while, DNA polymerase, the enzyme in charge of building the new DNA strand, makes a mistake. Normally, there are other enzymes in charge of fixing this, and they can do it before anything goes wrong, precisely because growth rate is limited. However, with the sheer number of cells that would need to be created in such a short time to achieve visible real-time healing, the errors would not be fixed, and they would accumulate. And what happens when your DNA gets corrupted? Well, a whole bunch of stuff, but most notoriously, cancer. In short, a self-healing superpower would, quite ironically, basically give you instant cancer as soon as you got wounded. And I would guess, with the huge cell growth boost you'd need to have that superpower in the first place, any kind of cancer would turn into a huge mass of flesh the size of your body, killing you in the process in a matter of hours. Just a quick reminder, this was supposed to be called super healing. Number 4. Immunity to all diseases. Well, we've already seen healing is not the best superpower. But, you know what they say, prevention is better than cure, right? What about immunity to all diseases? As innocuous and convenient as it sounds, from its inclusion in this video, you might guess what's coming next. There are two main ways you could have this perk. Either magic or a super immune system. Let's start with magic. So let's say your body has some kind of barrier which simply deletes any disease-causing microbes or pathogens whenever they're about to enter your body. Sounds cool, right? You wouldn't have to worry about washing your hands or eating food from the floor. Actually, that's gross. But there's a small big problem with this, and it comes down to how the immune system works. You see, your immune system, the body's machinery to fight off disease, is constantly adapting to new threats and conditions. This is why stuff like vaccination works. By exposing ourselves to weakened versions of pathogens, we can develop the antibodies necessary to fight them. Now, this is cool, but the opposite is also true. If you watched my video on allergies, You might know that the likely reason for their increasing frequency in the modern world is that now that hygiene and healthcare are so advanced, our immune systems have been left underactive, which has caused some people's immune system to start targeting things that aren't really pathogens, like peanuts. But you know what's even worse than the immune system targeting random stuff and making an inflammation out of a piece of pollen? The immune system targeting you. And this can happen, they're what we call autoimmune diseases. And they range from vitiligo to type 1 diabetes to multiple sclerosis and all kinds of nasty disorders. If your superpower prevented any pathogens from entering your body, your immune system would be so absolutely inactive that soon enough you'd start developing tons of allergies and autoimmune diseases and probably die. However, even though you're not spared from allergies, we could say autoimmune diseases are diseases your superpower could prevent. The thing is, what your superpower would need to delete to prevent this are your white blood cells, the cells in charge of the immune response. Well, fine, not like you were gonna use them anyway, right? Yeah, about that. Turns out white blood cells are quite important for a lot of stuff. Without them, no extra resources would be redirected to wounds to accelerate healing, so you would heal very slowly. Not only that, but white blood cells help keep the helpful bacteria in your gut in check. Normally, this helps in digestion, but without white blood cells, they'd be able to cause infections, and without a way to fight them, you'd die. And if your superpower kicks in to delete them, your digestion would be severely impaired, and you might still die from malnutrition. Great! So, seems like the super immune system would be a much better option then. Like, imagine your cells could instantly get rid of any and all instances of incoming pathogens. Sounds like it would work, right? Except remember, allergies. Because an immune system 100 times as strong would also make allergies and autoimmune diseases 100 times as strong. And as it would have the antibody capabilities to recognize and fight every single pathogen in existence, it would make you recognize all sorts of molecules as pathogens and instantly give you allergy to everything. Long story short, you just die. That's all you're gonna get from any form of this superpower. So I hope you enjoyed today's dose of fun ruining pedantry. If you liked the video and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.